This week we were going to talk about, I've given it the title, Likes in the Time of COVID-19. And broadly, what I wanted to kind of have a chat about was, what we have learned over the last kind of couple of months working with our clients and doing the work that we do day to day, and what we think we can kind of pass on in the way of useful kind of advice and tips for you guys, kind of navigating kind of that landscape as marketeers and business owners. So obviously we don't need to do introductions, so we can skip right through that. Obviously, last week we had a look at the tools and systems. You mentioned you've already started to make a bit of a list of bits to add in there, so that's really good to hear. This week, as I say, we're going to have a look at both some of the impacts that we're seeing of kind of COVID-19 on marketing and looking kind of slightly forward in the short and the medium term in terms of how we can adjust as businesses to kind of prepare for that and help to serve the needs of our users, customers, whoever we need to in the meantime. Start off with, we'll just run through a few kind of slides just to set a bit of a kind of a ballpark in terms of where we are, and obviously you'll know from your own kind of experiences what it's like out there at the moment. We've got a set of kind of 11 or 12 kind of slides that we'll run through in terms of broad lessons that we've learned kind of across the piece over the last few months working with different clients in different sectors in terms of what people are expecting and what you guys can be doing, and then at the end just a few kind of recommendations for how we kind of try and tell people we think it's kind of worthwhile gearing up for kind of the coming weeks and months. Obviously, as ever, we'll do questions at the end, but if there is anything that you particularly wanted to mention or ask as we go through, given our one-to-one setting this week, you are more than welcome to stop me at any point, buddy.
No problem. Sounds good.
As we go along as well, so that's not a problem. So obviously it goes to say COVID-19 has had an unprecedented impact on everything. Certainly in our lifetimes, I don't think we've ever seen anything of quite this kind of impact and scale, really. We saw things, 9/11 shut down air travel for a month, but then within a month, everything was, kind of back to normal. In reality, that's not the case here. Everything is both completely different and not really going to be going back to complete normalcy anytime soon. Obviously internally in a business setting, those kind of budgets have shrunk / disappeared, depending on how lucky you might tend to be. Obviously you've seen, at the same time you're cut off from the audience and not able to kind of bring new revenue into the business at the same time. And one thing I've found in my kind of print production marketing capacity is that as well as that B2B audience not potentially being there and being a source of revenue for you guys, actually it caused big issues up and down the supply chain as well. We've ended up having to pay a little bit more for things over the last few months, or having to delay certain projects because the supply chain just hasn't been there. On top of all of that, obviously, anything that we are doing online is subject to increasing distraction at the same time. Obviously, you turn on Twitter now as an example, and the first thing you see at the top is latest COVID-19 updates and latest government advice and stuff. And understandably, that's a pretty big distraction for people right now. And so, whatever people's intent might be when they potentially go online or open a particular social app or anything else, very quickly for people to get, very, very easy, I should say, for people to get kind of distracted and disappear down kind of a bit of a COVID rabbit hole as well. So we are kind of fighting that particular battle as well. And honestly, as we've kind of alluded to in other sessions as well, the daily kind of life and pattern of what we were previously working with and has completely disappeared. If you were previously working in a B2B market, for instance, the majority of the kind of activity and stuff that we might have been doing might have been working between, say, kind of 8:30 and 4:30, as your kind of core hours. Increasingly now, obviously, we're seeing people having to work, much longer, later hours, more fragmented kind of working days. And so the way that people are kind of consuming kind of content, social, web stuff is all kind of changing as well. And that's something we've noticed in our kind of web analytics, email opens, social engagements kind of across the board. Actually, we've seen a much more irregular kind of spread of when people are online, what kind of content people are responding to, and kind of when and how often things like emails and stuff are getting opened as well. So, it is very clear that, it's having a genuine impact on people's kind of working lives and patterns as well. With that in mind, obviously, digital marketing, as we've kind of talked about over the last kind of few weeks, is something that actually plays a really vital vital role for you guys for a number of reasons. Obviously, it's something that can be kind of universally applied and delivered anytime from you guys, and at the same time can be kind of consumed by your users at any time. It's something that it's very easy to track the kind of results and ROI on. So, you can go through things like your analytics and your dashboards and very quickly identify what's working and what's not. Obviously, at the moment while we're sat inside, you're not able to, do moves, go quote customers and do those kind of day-to-day tasks that you'd normally be doing. But the marketing stuff is activity that can generally all be delivered remotely, which is obviously another big plus for it right now. And it's something that is ultimately in a lot of areas completely free for you guys to be able to start working with those areas as well. So it's something where, especially when you've got a situation where the audience is still online and spending more time there is kind of genuine opportunity to be had there, as we'll kind of allude to in a second. Just for kind of a visual kind of clue as to where we're at the moment, this is quite an interesting one for me for some context. This is British retail sales during April 2020, and you can see that horrible crater in blue line there right at the end is an actual 18% drop in retail sales across the UK during the period of April, I should say. But interestingly, online sales increased by 8% during the same period. So that really kind of highlights the need for businesses to be able to kind of offer some kind of an online option and be able to meet the customers ultimately where they are, even if they can't, kind of welcome them into a kind of a bricks and mortar environment. And we put at the bottom there, it's fairly apparent, but ultimately the businesses that have adapted or were prepared for something like this are the ones that have really been able to kind of thrive and make the most of the situation. In reality, we talked about the fact that people are spending kind of more time online at the moment. I thought some of these stats were quite interesting to give you some context as to where we're at. Obviously, this is tracking a period, I think, from February through to April was this particular survey that they were looking at. And you can see the kind of metrics that we're kind of working within. Online news consumption had gone up 67% in that time. Social media consumption had gone up 44% in that time. Podcast consumption 12%. So with all of this in mind, there is a huge kind of appetite out there for content that you can be kind of leaning into. So in spite of all of the kind of the negativity and the distractions and everything else, with the right messaging and content, you can still be kind of cutting through that noise and engaging with people, hopefully fairly effectively. So with that in mind, then, like I say, we've got a set of slides together here where we're going to run through some of the kind of the top tips and strategies that we've been kind of sharing and implementing with some of our clients over the last few months, try and help them kind of get the most out of lockdown, really, and try and keep things moving as much as they possibly can, however that might kind of look like for those particular businesses. So the first one we've, is some of these kind of stand to reason, but, be flexible is obviously the most important thing that we can kind of say to people right now. Ultimately, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. So, there have been all kinds of examples locally from Warner Edwards, who, pivoted from making gin to making hand sanitizer, through to businesses maybe shifting from a restaurant model through to something completely online delivery based. There's been lots of examples of businesses either completely changing their kind of core offering for a period of time, or finding a new way of delivering those services remotely. Other examples I've seen, kind of yoga teachers and stuff shift from running yoga classes to running virtual yoga classes and stuff online. So there are plenty of kind of options available for some businesses. Admittedly, someone like yourself, Seb, in a removal area, it's going to be kind of tricky to kind of move people remotely, I would imagine.
Indeed. I mean, I've offered sort of like Zoom house quotes, and sort of there's been a lot more, whereas before it might be a phone call or an email and then a visit, there's been a lot more sort of correspondence digitally.
But have you found that helped to speed the process up a little?
Yes and no. Yes, it does, because you can they can get an idea of the services and an idea of, what we offer, and that's helped them. But sometimes a lot of people like the old school face-to-face, the personal touch. So I think for some customers it's helped, but for others, I think you need a lot of people just like, look, I really don't know how to say it. Can you just come round? Whereas, that's been a bit of a no-no recently. So what we've tried to say is, look, we'll come round if we can adhere to these practices, and once we've discussed all the information, so A, we know if it's a job that we can do, B, we know if it's a job that was in your budget. So we started out ticking a few boxes off before we made that content. But it's been interesting because, you know, I would have never thought at Christmas time when I'd be doing a house quote through FaceTime. But
Sure.
hey, you got to go with the times, haven't you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's great that you've been able to find ways of still replicating some of those kind of customer experiences and stuff, utilizing the tools and stuff that you've got available. So that's great to hear, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, just we've put kind of 2 notes at the bottom there. Obviously, some of this is kind of more appropriate to some of our customers than others. Kind of one-off discounts and offers that we've found have been particularly attractive to people through this period of time. You know, we talked about the fact budgets are being kind of cut across a range of different kind of sectors and stuff right now. And honestly, we've found certainly some of our kind of customers that are in the box shifting business have been able to kind of generate pretty good levels of sales through the lockdown period by following kind of fairly aggressive pricing strategies and discount options and stuff for bulk purchases. So, you know, while it's not ideal, and I'd hate to kind of advise anybody, you know, to start devaluing what you do dramatically as a way of trying to kind of keep some revenue coming in, we're certainly finding from a kind of a marketing point of view and generating leads as well that, yeah, they're certainly quite attractive hooks for people right now.
I think the big problem is you've got a lot of businesses who are struggling. So whereas you may have your seasonal sales and that, you'll have a lot of cross companies sort of trying to offer a varied range of services. So, you know, in my industry, I might have a landscape gardener who has had so many jobs cancelled. So now he's got a vehicle and he's like, right, can I offer haulage? Can I do this? Can I do that? And I think you find that across the board with a lot of people, that you've not only got to do your sales, but you've got to be aware of what other people's sales are and how everybody else is treating. Because whereas before it was, let's make sure the quality is the number one key. Now, because everyone's struggling, it's like, right, let's value for money is the most important thing at the moment. You know, who's the cheapest, really?
Yeah, well, it's that triangle, isn't it? You can always have kind of 2 of fast, good, or cheap, and you have to pick 2. And unfortunately, at the minute, cheap is the
yeah, it's not always best, though.
anchor, isn't it? One of the 2. I'll take that one for definite.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, well, next kind of piece of advice that we're, again, kind of sharing widely with people is obviously kind of a bit of a 3-parter, but be consistent, be visible, be available to people. You know, it's super important that, you know, whether it's answering pre-sales inquiries, post-sales follow-up, or just generally kind of engaging with a potential audience, that it's really kind of important that people can either, you know, both find you and connect with you and engage with you online as well. We're saying to people, you know, obviously, people have got a fairly basic list of questions that they want to know about all businesses at the moment. You know, are you open? Are you offering delivery? How long a delay might we be kind of subject to and stuff right now? And so we're kind of telling everyone that, you know, it's really important you make sure all your kind of websites and media channels are updated with COVID kind of specific updates and stuff. If it's having an effect on your kind of working practices, working hours, anything like that, then you need to make sure they are kind of well communicated to people. Ditto if you've got presences on kind of external platforms, you know, TripAdvisor, Just Eat, I've put on there as 2 examples of different ones for now, accommodation and food and drink. Make sure that any changes are kind of reflected on there. So if people are engaging with you within a particular ecosystem that isn't your website and stuff, that information is available. Make sure obviously your social channels are kind of regularly updated as well. Keep any important info pinned right at the top of your news feed so that anybody that kind of lands on the site can find that information at a glance right at the top. Also, your bios and stuff in your social channels will be another useful place that you can put kind of quick, snappy updates that kind of communicate, you know, we're still open, we're still going to hear for quotes or options or deliveries or whatever. I know a lot of businesses have been kind of having to work remotely and stuff at the minute, which has had some interesting implications with like phone systems and stuff. So obviously, if you've got phone numbers advertised anywhere and they've changed as a result of lockdown, then we're making sure all of those are updated and stuff as well. And we've also, you know, something we've alluded to during our kind of previous sessions as well, we're trying to make everybody think about, you know, other ways that people might want to reach out and how you can kind of meet people halfway there as well, you know. So whether that be setting up kind of auto responses on Facebook Messenger, whether that be integrating live chat into the website and offering that as an option for people to engage with you as well. But like I say, we're trying to say to people, it's really important that you don't just kind of disappear from all kind of visibility and disappear off the face of the planet and expect expect customers to still come and find you, With that in mind, obviously, if we are kind of going to be out there and visible and hopefully kind of vocal and engaging out there, then it's important that we do kind of think about tone. We talked in one of the previous sessions, I think one of the intro to digital marketing sessions, we had the color wheel up that talked about kind of language and the kind of end result that it engenders in people, So when you kind of use fear-based language, the kind of responses that it triggers with people. And, it's important to think about, the tone and the language of anything that we are putting out into the world. Generally we try and tell anybody to avoid anything kind of too controversial or divisive when it comes to business feeds. So at the minute, the schools reopening is the classic example I'm seeing of it being a real hot button issue for people. And there's going to be different takes on different opinions as we go forward. So we try and say to people, while when it came to lockdown first happening, I was one of the people rounding up people locally for a good hectoring of the MPs to try and make sure there was some support for small businesses in there and stuff. And I think in those kind of settings, it's quite useful to add a business voice to some of those conversations. But I think, anything that's kind of likely to get too kind of controversial or divisive or emotional is probably an area to avoid. Obviously, the kind of link to that, don't be tone deaf at the same time. We say to people, make sure that you are kind of appropriate to the conversation that's going on as well. There's the kind of a definite balance to be had, I think, between everything's normal and everything's fucked. So I think if you can, try and find some kind of balance and an appropriate tone in there that kind of comforts, that engages with people, but doesn't slip into, just here's what I'm selling and whatever's going on in the world, kind of be damned, then it's definitely something to kind of keep at the forefront of your thoughts. And we've said to people with that in mind, don't be afraid to use the C word. This coronavirus situation isn't going away. It's not something that's going to be, a taboo subject in a month's time. So, don't be afraid to kind of get in there and talk about it and the effect that it's going to have in. And, ultimately, if it's going to mean changes to the experience that a user has with your business, then, be honest, be upfront about those and talk about the ways that you can kind of spin that to an advantage, At the same time, we've said to people, the one thing that has really helped on social media particularly is to kind of stay kind of engaged and to find new people over the last kind of few months is ultimately to be real, to be empathetic, to be kind of honest and transparent about what you're doing, and ultimately I think there's a genuine kind of sense, I think, of community out there at the moment, especially around kind of small businesses and people wanting to kind of support local and to get engaged with that. And I think a big part of that is kind of engendering that kind of empathy and those kind of real human connections with people and stuff. So, we've said to people, in the name of whatever you're doing socially, it doesn't always have to be a conversation about, what you're selling, what you're doing, something that's directly relevant. It's all right to just check in with your audience and, see how everybody's doing. Like I say, be real with them. I've posted a couple of times over the last kind of few weeks about, being honestly a bit scared about going out and doing like photo shoots on client sites and stuff like that, and being kind of vulnerable about it and just explaining to people what it's actually like, and honestly, those kind of bits of content that we've put out have actually proved to be really engaging. They've actually sparked kind of conversations with all kinds of new people and stuff over the last kind of couple of weeks. So ultimately businesses, especially ones like ours that are ultimately a person that's driving so much of it, it's okay to be real, it's okay to be personable with people. And honestly, I think people are kind of there for that right now. There's definitely a sense that we are all in this together, and that goes both ways. We want our customers to be there for us, but we kind of want to be there for our customers as well. And kind of to that end, we've said one thing that has worked quite well for some of our clients over the last kind of few weeks as well has been kind of looking for opportunities to kind of lean in and lighten the mood and keep things a little bit lighthearted, whether it be silly dance videos on TikTok or, these kind of quizzes and challenges and stuff like that. On one hand, it's not particularly brand focused, and if it's not done right, it can look a bit cheesy and naff. But at the same time, it's part of the overall kind of discourse. Right now there seems to be a genuine kind of appetite for some of that kind of distracting, not quite Corona content and stuff as well. So at the same time, it's okay to lean into that and to give your audience something a bit more kind of lighthearted that they might be interested in. And at the same time, it's a great source of kind of fresh content in quiet times as well. If you're not out every day doing, removal jobs or quotes and meeting new customers and stuff, then, you might not have as much to talk about on social and stuff. So some of that slightly more kind of lighthearted, just kind of engaging with our kind of audience kind of content at the same time isn't the worst thing in the world as well. With that in mind, obviously, we're trying to tell people to make sure you are kind of tailoring your content, especially on things like your website and stuff that are your main kind of calling card for people as much as possible. COVID is going to remain part of our kind of daily lives for a little while, and ultimately over time is definitely going to become a part of people's kind of decision-making process. I think there are going to be businesses that pay little mind to it. And I think there are going to be businesses that, the well-being of their customers, their visitors, and, by extension, their communities is going to be a really important thing. And I think ultimately, certainly my instincts and my advice is to try and be on the right side of that when it all comes. I think customers is, especially the longer this goes on and, the more impact it potentially have. I think those businesses that are taking steps and putting measures in place to make allowances for it are going to be the ones that ultimately it kind of stands to enhance their reputation and that kind of trust with people a little bit more. With that in mind, we're making sure everybody that, if they're introducing COVID specific policies or changes to working practices, that they are all, super easy to understand and really kind of clearly communicated to people. So we've set up dedicated COVID pages within customers' websites. We've had kind of specific COVID kind of graphics put together that we've pushed into clients' social feeds and stuff over the last few weeks. All of it just to kind of keep people updated and, like I say, super accessible, so that when anybody does land with you with their list of questions, where are you? Are you open? Can you deliver to me? They've got all of that information that they need all in one place, dead easy. And like I say, we kind of trying to tell people as well to think about the kind of questions people are going to want answering right now and what kind of content would be useful for them as well. The Nenscape and River Nen people at the regional park have been working with the Wildlife Trust recently, for instance, going, well, okay, we can't deliver our usual kind of experience to users, but we've got a whole library and an archive full of really interesting and useful kind of content and information and stuff. And they've been doing all kinds of kids activities and challenges and coloring sheets and top trumps cards and stuff like that. And it's content that, while again doesn't perhaps translate immediately to, I don't know, 100 new visitors coming to check out the regional park next year, it's something that's of genuine use to those potential users right now that are sat looking for something for their kids to do for a couple of hours and potentially would love to find something for that. So, have a think about not only the kind of direct questions about you that people might want answering, but as I say, what generally might be of interest and of use to your audience right now as well.
Sorry, Ben, can I just butt in quickly?
Yeah,
just
no
while questions are cropping up. Do you find with a lot of the clients that you manage at the minute, their preference is to have content on their website, sort of like a dedicated Corona, FAQ page, rather than sort of overload the user, the end user with sort of COVID sort of facts and that? Because a lot of, some of my customers, I've had it from one extreme to another. Others where that's the first thing out of their mouth, where they're asking that what things have you set into place, and there's others like, please don't mention the word to me. I've had it up to here. So I try and obviously think about, I don't go on one side of the fence to another. I just try and be as safe as possible. And I've had those customers who are sort of completely relaxed about it, and I'm still like, well, hang on, let's make sure we're keeping our distance. If I'm in one room, you're in another. Let's keep the
Yeah.
ventilation, etc. But you don't want to isolate yourself so much that someone's looking at it and saying, hang on a minute, these guys are, I'm not going to go with these because they're too full on. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's quite a
Yeah.
delicate little situation, isn't it? You want to make sure that you're doing it, but you also want to make sure that you're still business as usual. You're still playing, you're still doing your day to day to the best of your
Yeah.
ability.
I mean, what it might be worth, like in your particular situation, yeah, it might be worth just having a very simple kind of banner somewhere on the top, or an item in your navigation on the website that just says, yeah, COVID advice, and just put everything in one kind of simple place, and then moving forward as a disclaimer on your quotes and all that kind of stuff, you can have, we take the safety of our customers.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds like a good way to do it. I mean, I haven't ever
Exactly.
pinned any tweets, but I suppose, the tweets that I've put out with my COVID statement, they could be a top tweet that people can see there. So it's there. So it's not overloading people, but the information is easy. How have you found it that the preference for your clients has been that to have a dedicated page on their website?
Generally, and especially, I mean, I've got quite a few clients within, food and drink, who have been obviously looking to get the advice out. So we're still open for delivery and stuff, so we need to get that out there. Obviously, the tourism guys, with them not wanting to spark a rush of cancellations, it's been a little bit more kind of suck it and see, and we'll kind of tweak things as we go. We've been kind of publishing blog posts and put in kind of general kind of social updates as we go along. But obviously with those guys, there's not really a fixed kind of timeline or path in place at the moment, so it's a little bit more difficult for some of those guys. And obviously the specialist cleaning clients that we've got, those processes and information stuff is absolutely crucial. So yeah, those guys absolutely wanted something front and center on the website that said, here is the latest update on COVID and everything.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, so I suppose that each business is, they've been using it, what works for one doesn't work for another. So you've got to look at exactly what your business is and what the customers are going to be expecting. So yeah.
Absolutely.
No,
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, you'll get quite a good feel, I would imagine, fairly quickly as you're talking to people as to, how much of a consideration this is for them. But like I say, as long as you've got everything, easy to understand, accessible, kind of all in one place, have a /COVID website address that you can give people, so it's dead easy to remember if it's just a conversation and they need to look it up online later and stuff. But yeah, I think as long as it's kind of clear, easy to understand and easy to find, that would be my kind of advice all the way along, really.
Gotcha.
So obviously we're in kind of quite a unique position at the minute as kind of business owners and marketeers, in that obviously a lot of the stuff we would normally be out in the world kind of doing, we're not out in the world doing at the minute. I mean, my April and May was supposed to be just wall-to-wall events. We got stuff Birmingham, London, Amsterdam, all over the place, all of which got pushed to kind of September through to November. So I mean, our kind of calendar with some of our clients has been kind of completely turned on its head for this year. But obviously what that does do is give us a fairly unique opportunity to sit and kind of take stock of our kind of digital to-do lists, and hopefully that's something that you've been able to start doing over the last few weeks as we've kind of worked through the kind of various installments of this series. So as an immediate kind of list of 6 or 7 points there, obviously we've talked a lot about social media and email marketing over the last few weeks, and the opportunities that they offer in terms of being a free direct channel through to your audience. Big part of the puzzle, and we'll talk in a little bit more detail later on actually about taking the time to sit down now and analyze what we've been doing over the previous period of months, years, however long you've been kind of going for, and seeing what of that activity has worked, what's been really beneficial, and start to see how that can shape our strategy moving forward. And at the same time, we've seen lots of businesses looking to start exploring kind of new channels and new activities as well, whether that be starting a podcast, doing more kind of video content, which I know something you mentioned that you were looking to start doing and putting a bit more time into, or picking up a completely new skill through something like the Google Garage. I don't know if you've checked out the link from the back of these slides each week
It's
for you
on,
to do or
it's
garage.
on my to-do list, definitely.
Yeah, it's a really useful one as well, you know. So, you know, ultimately as marketeers, yeah, it's frustrating at the moment that we're not able to push out, you know, campaigns or events in the ways that we'd normally like to, you know. But at the same time, yeah, on a practical level, yeah, we're certainly telling everyone, if you've got the time right now is the time to be sitting and starting to put some time and planning into these kind of areas. Because again, with businesses, you know, my size, your size, and some of the other people that have been on over the last few weeks, you know, when we are doing marketing stuff and planning content and all that kind of stuff, we're not doing something else. You know, we're not moving family blogs from A to B. We're not kind of designing someone's website. And so as a result, I don't know what your experiences are like, but it can be a real challenge sometimes to actually get that time in to do that kind of planning and scheduling work and stuff yourself. So yeah, it's for me, it's one of the biggest investments I think you can put into that kind of post lockdown kind of bounce back actually is going to be
I think you've just got to use your time, because at the end
yeah.
of the day, everybody's suffering. You know, it's a pretty negative time, but you've got to spin it on its head and make it a positive time, and do, like, you know, I didn't have a video on my to-do list this year, and I've
Okay.
posted one already. So you've had to flip it on its side and say, right, okay, so I've got to, you know, I had a good 5 or 6 weeks without work, and I was like, right, what can I do in that time? So I
Yeah.
gave myself a to-do list and started scratching them off. So it has been, I wouldn't say time wasted at all. I think I needed the downtime
Yeah.
to get my thinking cap on. So I've used it wisely. And I think if you haven't had the chance to do that, then you probably missed out, because
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than just being negative and thinking, right, I'm lost out. You know, I mean, ultimately, there's people who can't take the hit because, you know, they've got too much overheads,
Yeah.
etc. But for the people who can, it's turn the negative into a positive and see where it gets you.
Absolutely. No, absolutely agree with you, mate. With that in mind, obviously, next thing we've been trying to sit down and get into motion over the last couple of weeks, certainly, has been actually putting together some of these kind of detailed content strategies that we've kind of discussed over the last couple of weeks. I mean, you know, when we talk about, you know, SEO and content strategy kind of hand in hand quite often, because obviously one informs the other in terms of, you know, what kind of keywords we wanted to be targeting, what niches we're pushing our content at. And ultimately, the problem is the way Google kind of indexes and plays catch up on content. If you say if you stopped doing anything today, it might be 2 months before that lack of work or update on the site has any kind of effect on your kind of search engine positioning as well. Vice versa, any positive work that we start doing today, it's not going to have an effect for, you know, a couple of weeks, potentially a couple of months and stuff as well. So, you know, by not kind of planning what comes next and taking kind of the fullest advantage of that, it definitely presents the issue of creating issues down the road, you know, in terms of dropping down search engine rankings and, you know, as a result, ultimately losing leads, losing business coming in. So, you know, we think, you know, while you've got the time to start, you know, actually putting this plan together right now, then, you know, using some of the scheduling tools that we've talked about over the last few weeks means that you can actually put together 3, 6, 12 months worth of campaigns, however long you wanted to right now, kind of built and scheduled and left to kind of deliver to its own purposes, you know, so that when you get back to work and back to kind of full capacity, kind of doing your day to day, you know, that time that you're able to spend now doing that marketing work isn't in vain, you know, and that kind of marketing function of the business, if you will still kind of continue to kind of spin its wheels and do what it's supposed to long after you've kind of put it down to pick something else up, forgive the pun. With that in mind, obviously, just to kind of recap some of the key points that we talked about over the last few weeks when it comes to, you know, sitting down and writing our content plan. Obviously, who we're trying to reach and, you know, what their preferences are is going to be quite a useful place to start in terms of, you know, what does our audience look like? Where are they spending their time? You know, if when someone's moving house, for instance, you know, what are the kind of resources that they're looking for? What are the kind of information they're looking for? And things like the keyword planner on Google and search trends in Google, for instance, will be a really useful indicator for that, to start looking at potential strings of, you know, moving house and removal services, or, you know, pack-in lists and, you know, those kind of things, and start to kind of reverse engineer the process that way. Obviously from there, you want to start to kind of throw in what your kind of key messages are. You know, what is it you do? What is it that marks you out as particularly unique above the competition? And also what format those messages take, you know. So are we looking to deliver them via a series of social media updates kind of day by day over the coming weeks? Is it going to be a weekly blog? Are we going to have, you know, a monthly video? So start to think about, you know, how we can cut all of those particular messages up into, you know, different sorts of content and different types of updates to push out to people. Obviously, we say a calendar is one of the most useful tools that you can put at your disposal when it comes to planning these kind of things out. Just to really easily, you know, show at a glance when your emails are going, when blog posts are going up, what social campaigns are running when, to put it all kind of down into one place. I've got a really useful template actually that I'm going to share at the end of this session with you all, that you can start to potentially make use of as well, that kind of follows through kind of each of the steps and enables you to put it all into kind of one place in like a little planner document, which I thought might be something really useful when you're starting to think to put this together. And as we've
sounds good.
As we've kind of put on the bottom here, obviously, think about all of the, you know, we talk, I think, yeah, on the next slide, we talk about, you know, how we can, you know, repurpose a great idea into a blog post, and that's great. But actually, you know, right away from there, there's immediately half a dozen different areas that you can take the content that makes up that blog post and kind of repurpose it in different areas, you know, whether that be extracts being pushed out into your LinkedIn articles section, whether you know, you're putting the images from the post out into Instagram with a link, whether that be an explainer video going out on LinkedIn to say, oh, hey, I've just put this new blog post up on the website talking about, you know, the top 5 things you should do before we're preparing to move house and stuff like that. And just start to think, yeah, about, okay, actually, I've got 3 months worth of blog posts here, but how am I actually going to push people at those 3 months worth of blog posts as well? And like I say, very quickly, between kind of a calendar, your list of blog posts, and something like Buffer and If that we've talked about over the last couple of weeks, then yeah, you can really quickly and easily start to kind of put together all of those campaigns all in one place, schedule your kind of corresponding mail shots in MailChimp and stuff, and essentially kind of sit and wait for those kind of campaigns to deliver, you know, and start to kind of react from that, take what you've learned from them and put that into the next one, you know. With that in mind, we say to people, obviously, one of the most important things that you can do right now while you've got the time, and something we've spent quite a lot of time pouring through results and stuff over the last few weeks, to just sit and really take stock of the kind of the nuts and bolts of what it is that you're doing. So whether that be, you know, going through website analytics, whether that be going and sitting through your Twitter dashboard, ideally all of those places, to get a really kind of clear picture of, you know, actually, how are people finding me? What are they looking for? How am I engaging with them when I have those conversations? We always say to people, try and take the time to kind of audit your own kind of website and online offering from a kind of a neutral point of view. You know, I think it's quite easy sometimes to go, well, I love my website, so I'm not going to think about it. Or, you know, conversely, I have other clients who go, actually, there's this one thing about my website that really bugs me. But actually, when we look at the analytics, we go, yeah, that particular thing might bug you, but it works because we can see the flow of traffic through that page converting. So it kind of does what it's supposed to for a reason, you know. So it's important sometimes, I think, to sit and go through that user journey from the user point of view as well, actually, and work out, you know, what are all of the touch points that a user might have with me? What is the experience like at each step of that way as well? 2 things that we talked about last week that will be a really important part of the SEO puzzle that you can be looking at right now is the one, running a good thorough SEO report on your site to get an understanding of how it's performing at the moment and what kind of quick wins you can take to improve that. And we looked at, I think, some of those over the last, at least 2, I think, of the sessions we've touched on some of those SEO quick wins, haven't we, in the last few weeks? And obviously running your backlinks report as well to check who's linking to you at the moment, and is there any kind of obvious gaps that you could be filling there to try and potentially generate some more visitors as well. One thing we've been trying to encourage people to do over the last few weeks, especially given the fact that users have got significantly more amounts of time online at the moment, is to try and engage with the audience that you've got a little bit more, to try and get some more kind of meaningful feedback on what you're doing. A like is great, retweet is lovely, but ultimately it only, it gives you a certain sense of what people particularly like to see in their social kind of news feeds. It doesn't ever particularly take any kind of a valuable snapshot of actually what people's kind of feelings on either that particular piece of content or what you as a business are actually doing right or wrong. So whether that be kind of short, snappy surveys on Twitter that you might want to run, like kind of instant quick win Twitter polls that might give you kind of very quick, if low quality feedback on, specific questions. Or, some of our other kind of customers, we've got, I've got a company, Spacevac, that I work with, who we're putting together a big kind of detailed user satisfaction survey at the moment. That's a big kind of 10-page survey actually that goes through and asks questions of kind of each step of that kind of user journey, whether that be, their interactions with accounts, sales, the workshop, anything like that and stuff as well. So yeah, if you've got an audience that you can potentially lean on that have got a bit more time to give you that kind of feedback and stuff at the minute, then try and lean into that as well, because ultimately that's going to be some of the most important feedback that you can try and gather as well. And I think we've put various tools together over the last kind of couple of weeks certainly in the marketing stack. The marketing stack conversation that we had last week that will help you kind of assess some of the impacts and effectiveness of your kind of marketing activity as well. Another quick one for social that I'm not sure if we did mention last week is a service called Clout. Do you know of Clout?
I don't think so. No, I'm not. Was that mentioned last week? I can't recall.
No, actually, I don't think it was, because I'll be honest, it's not really kind of a service that does something as such. It's not like you can kind of plug it into your phone and it will do X, Y, and Z for you. Okay. But it's quite a useful benchmarking tool in that what you do is it connects all of your social feeds up into one place, and it essentially assesses everything you're doing and gives you a score, so it might be 70 out of 100 or 50 out of 100, and that kind of gives you a benchmark to work from, essentially, in terms of your engagement rate and your kind of general authority level within kind of particular keywords, for instance. So you could set up, I want to be looking specifically within kind of removal services and maybe home moving, something like that. And then obviously what it does is you can then benchmark what you're doing against other businesses kind of in that sector. So,
that's good. So what's that, Clout?
Clout, yeah, with a K, K-L-O-U-T.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's quite a useful one for kind of measuring over, a month, 2 months, over those kind of slightly longer periods.
So you could assess it and it may come back to you to say, look, maybe you need to address your Twitter, the sort of the type of information you're getting on there, you're getting lower.
Go into it and go, oh, okay, actually, look, over this kind of month, I put all of this kind of extra effort in. I was tweeting more regularly. I was getting more likes on my Instagram posts and my LinkedIn updates and stuff. And so as a result, yeah, my Clout score has gone up because, people can see that, users are more engaged with me. My kind of authority and position in relation to those keywords has gone up as a result of what I'm doing. So that can be a really useful one as you go along, just to kind of keep tabs on as well for kind of how well some of that social stuff is doing. So yeah, like I say, while you've got the time, and it's something that, again, when things are kind of back to normal, potentially you might not have exactly the same amount of time to be able to sit and grill kind of delivery reports and analytics and stuff. But certainly while we are in that phase of kind of A, having a bit more time, and B, looking to kind of make that time effective and plan the next few months worth of activity, then yeah, it's going to be a big part of it. With that in mind as well, and something you kind of alluded to a couple of slides ago, actually, one thing we are eagerly trying to do at the minute is keep an eye on kind of competition within various sectors, because that can sometimes be quite a good indicator, actually, of any potential opportunities that you can exploit on. So we always say to people, as a matter of course, when we start working with them, who are your competition? Let's go and do a bit of a deep dive on them. So subscribe to their email list, lists and start to get a feel for what kind of work they're doing with email marketing. Connect with them on social media. How engaged are they? Who are the key cheerleaders? You know, we've talked, I think, in our social media session in week 2, we talked about this idea of trying to identify key figures within our following who we can rely on to like, to engage, to retweet, to amplify our message to the world. So, you know, try and find out who is doing that job for our competition at the moment, and how can we kind of engage with them and maybe get some of that enthusiasm coming our way. And ultimately as well, you'll be able to get a feel looking at their kind of things like their likes, their retweets and replies and stuff. You'll be able to get a feel for, you know, what kind of content they push out into the world that works and doesn't work, and use that to inform some of our decisions as well. Obviously, one thing, if you're running kind of pay-per-click campaigns and stuff, then it's useful to keep an eye on what kind of campaigns and spends your competition are putting out as well. We've got one client in particular at the moment who's got one competitor that they're at loggerheads with, and they've been fighting tooth and nail for years over essentially the same market. My particular client has kept their ad spend uniform through Corona and has kept it the same. Their competitor has dropped it significantly. And what we found as a result of that is that we're seeing significantly less competition for the ads on a daily basis. So not only, even though we are seeing less ads being shown because people are searching less, what we're finding is that because the competition's ads aren't in the usual kind of positions 2 and 3 below us, that actually those ads are getting significantly higher click-through rates and responses, and are significantly cheaper. So at the minute, they're displaying half as many ads as they were. They're getting 4-5 times the click-through rate on the ads, and they're paying half what they were for them as well. So there are times when actually kind of keeping an eye on what everyone else is doing and keeping your kind of ad spend level just kind of where it is / a little bit ahead of what they're doing will ultimately start to pay some dividends for you guys as well. And we put at the bottom, it's one kind of not to shy away from, you know, ultimately imitation is flattery. You know, we say to people, if someone else has had a great idea, don't be afraid to go, well, actually, how could we adapt that great thinking to what we're doing and deliver some kind of value to our audience and potential audience as well. So while you've got the time, keeping an eye on the competition and what other people are doing to attract the same kind of eyeballs will be a really useful part of the process for you. How relevant this might be for you, particularly Seb, I don't know. I imagine there'll be plenty of opportunities potentially for you to do this. But what we are saying for people at the moment is, you know, on a personal level, the businesses are being affected in kind of all kinds of different ways. But there are some issues that we're all kind of facing fairly universally at the moment. So we're actually finding on a local level that there is significant appetite at the moment for kind of locally partnering up with people where you can, both on a practical real world point of view. I've seen companies sharing delivery routes and doing what they can to help each other kind of keep their products flowing, through to some of the more nuts and bolts bits of our SEO puzzle that we've talked about, for instance, over the last few weeks. So, you know, looking for opportunities for link building between websites, trying to find and connect with, you know, your social champions and finding out who are the people that are going to actually shout and amplify your message for you, and trying to develop those relationships. You know, we've done a few things over the last few weeks that we would class as, you know, pay it forward for people, and you know, trying to find ways to add value without necessarily, you know, making a huge amount of money for it, to be able to build those kind of relationships. And we've actually found that, you know, where we found opportunities to cross promote and joint deliver kind of services and products, that actually there's been some really useful and interesting benefits for doing that. So where possible, both kind of in the real world and in the digital world right now, we're saying to people, yeah, if you've got the opportunity to link up with and partner up with, you know, local businesses that can potentially, you know, help you reach the same kind of people, then take every opportunity that you can in that regard.
I've actually spent this week doing a similar sort of thing to that.
Awesome.
I mean, I do work with a local company on bigger scale jobs. Even yesterday I was actually doing one with that, and that's been a connection which is, you know, pre-COVID. But I mean, I find that's really good, because it's good to get connections, because although necessarily we'll go different paths, you've always got someone to rely on. So if I was struck down with illness, I've got somebody that I can rely on. But going back to what you've just mentioned, I this week, one of my to-do lists was to engage with a local company who offers different service to mine, but within the same sort of field. So somebody who would be moving house may need both of our services.
Sure.
And I thought, hang on a minute, I've had a couple of inquiries, not for me, although they've come through to me, but maybe I can pass them on to these guys. So what I did was I sort of made a way of sending a couple of emails to say, look, I'm getting a lot of these sort of inquiries. Would it be worthwhile if I start forward? Have I got a name and a number that I can give to them and say, look, I can't, but these can, and vice versa. If I was to do that for you, is there any way sort of you can do a similar sort of service for me?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the response, I got a response back straight away, and it was like, really, really like the sound of that. Thanks for sort of making the first step into that. And I thought, well, you know, they've recognised that they're saying they're going to do it. Great stuff. And only a couple of days later, I was seeing sort of social media posts from them sort of saying, look, try these guys, pointing at myself. So that half an hour spent sending them a couple of emails have been a real positive thing. So, and I probably wouldn't have had the time to think of it or do it if it hadn't been for this sort of you know, sloping work.
Absolutely, but that's awesome, man. That's really good to hear, actually. Yeah, like I say, I think they'll be absolutely gold dust. And especially we talked about the importance of making sure we've got kind of good, relevant kind of inbound links into the site as well and stuff, and how useful that can be. So yeah, no, that sounds absolutely perfect, mate, from an SEO side and a practical business coming inside. Yeah, no, that's absolutely brilliant. Sweet. Well, next thing we've been kind of stressing to people, and to be honest with you, this isn't necessarily something that's kind of COVID specific, but it's worth kind of reminding people at this point in time, with people needing to kind of find and engage with businesses online almost exclusively at the moment. It's more important than it has ever been before for people to be able to find you as easily as possible. So, you know, spend a little bit of time examining how the site or how your own site and business fares in Google searches, and actually start to you know, have a look at, you know, the keyword strings that you might want to be coming up for, and find out how you're performing in those kind of searches at the moment. How often are people coming across you organically?
Again, sorry, Ben, I gave myself a sort of pat on the back a couple of days ago, because that was one of my jobs as well, to say, right, let's do a little bit of searching for yourself and keywords and see where you get. And just sort of joking around and just having a little, you know, a little play, and going on Google and typing in a keyword for me and going on to images. I was the third image.
Okay, that's good news.
Yeah. I was, you know, not myself personally, but obviously my brand and my vehicle, one of my vehicles was on there as picture number 3 for a main keyword. And I thought, wow, you know, that's and I think that's probably originated through Gumtree, Gumtree advert clicks. But it was quite engaging to say, look, you know, I messaged a couple of my friends who are not local to me to say, look, type this in, see what you get. And they're all sort of sending me screenshots. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. It just goes to show you, if you're putting in the effort and you're doing a continuous thing, where I've been sort of Gumtree adding for a couple of years now, that it's paying off, because people are just typing it in, click that, and you can see it. So it does fare well to do it, because what it did for me, it sort of gives you a little bit of, it gives you a thumbs up, a pat on the back to say, hang on a minute, keep doing what you're doing. It's working. It's working.
Well, that's awesome to hear, man. And hopefully as well, like I say, if you get the time as well to run your SEO report on your site, that will give you a really useful kind of to-do list in terms of other things that you can be doing to optimize for search as well. One thing we always say to everyone is to make sure your social handles all match. So, for instance, we are so very creative everywhere. So rather than it being, you know, @so_very_creative on Twitter, and something different on Instagram, for instance, you know, wherever people are, they can put @SoVeryCreative and find me in that place. So make sure it's really easy to find people on there. Make sure where you've got things like social profiles, external profiles on different websites and stuff, that your website domain is super visible and links up and accurate everywhere that it potentially appears as well. make sure you've registered for your Google Maps pin. Obviously, I think we talked about that in a previous installment as well. And at the same time as well, we always say to people, and it's quite a simple one, is your domain easy to remember as well? I don't know about you, but you get these big, long, complicated URLs that sometimes people all kind of buy without necessarily thinking about it. But yeah, they can sometimes be a bit of a nightmare. So making sure that it is kind of super easy to kind of remember and share with people, even in the real world, not necessarily online. You'll be talking to some people, I don't know, out on a job site. Oh, what's your website address? Oh, it's hire man and at a van at dot. Do you know what I mean? You have to give something.
Definitely, yeah. Sometimes people give you a website and you're like, I haven't even remembered.
Sorry, yeah. Could you write that down? Yeah, and as silly and practical as that sounds, it is true. I've had nightmares in the past with businesses that either have got really long and complicated domain names or have got completely ungoogleable names. I mean, So Very Creative is a nightmare name for Google. Making sure it is like I say, a 2-second job to find you online is going to be one of the most important things you can do, because ultimately people are super lazy when it comes to actually wanting to spend the time looking for stuff. So making it as easy as possible for people is going to be the name of the game.
Definitely. Do you find in regards to saying the social handles all matching, do you sort of do personally or recommend to your clients when, let's just say there's a new, like a couple of years ago when TikTok was blowing up, would you say to someone, look, register your social handle for them? You might not be thinking about it. You might not think that you would ever do it.
Yeah, it's useful to, and sometimes it's more difficult than others, because obviously, some people, social networks come online at different times in different places, and there might even, for the first kind of 12 months of TikTok, a lot of businesses were like, well, we're not going to really get involved with that because that looks like something that kids are doing and there's not really a market there for us. And then when finally those numbers grow to a point where they have to get involved because they go, well, there's a sizable number of people there, we're stupid not to, then they kind of jump on it, and sometimes that's when you'll end up with kind of fragmented URLs and stuff.
I just thought that's why I thought maybe it's a case of looking at all of the the top 10 social media platforms, whether it be Pinterest or whatever, and just saying, look, let me get an account on there, and even if I just do an account and do my logo, I've got it there for a rainy day. Because I mean, it would sort of niggle me if I had 9 out of 10 of my platforms with this sort of handle, and then one of them had an underscore. I'd be like, oh no, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's a real pain, and because obviously the first thing as well, when any of these new social networks kind of launch, the first thing people do is go on and hoover up all of the notable kind of brand names and stuff, because it then becomes a very grubby and very lucrative business, hawking those official usernames back to the businesses that are going to be looking for them,
Unless you're the royal family, that Instagram person got theirs robbed, didn't they?
It's amazing what strings you can pull, isn't
I know, yeah.
But like I say, hopefully you'll be able to kind of go down the list fairly. I know you're quite on top of a lot of your stuff already, Seb, but like I say, we tend to find those kind of half dozen things as an immediate point of call would be kind of some dead quick wins you can take to hopefully make it as easy as possible for people. And with that in mind, to kind of extend it to slightly that previous slide, it's worth kind of noting that obviously the restrictions on travel, the shutdown, the physical limitations in place right now means people have ultimately got to find much more localized content. It's no good me looking for something in Rushden or Corby or something. Actually, I need something in NN3. I need something right around the corner from me, ideally. So with that in mind, obviously making sure that what you're doing is kind of hyper localized as much as possible will be really important. We've talked about Google reviews before, haven't we, and how important they are for your SEO piece and trying to build that kind of trust score within Google.
Would you say that Google reviews, because Google is so massive in the world, Google reviews are the key over, say, TripAdvisor reviews for
Honestly,
a
I
B&B.
don't know for 100% exactly what the split is in terms of how they're weighted, because obviously there's so many different parts that go into it. The things like TripAdvisor and Yelp and those kind of peer reviews over the last couple of updates from Google, they've certainly become more important, and their importance has gone up over that.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, I find
But,
for me, I haven't set up Google reviews yet, and the reason I haven't is because this year was let's sort of not just do Facebook review, let's do Trustpilot. So my sole focus has been Trustpilot, and now I'm sort of this week I've had a few Facebook reviews. I'm thinking, well, I need to sort of get those matching up. But I do incentives where I say to someone, look, I'm doing an offer at the moment. If we can get 2 reviews from this job, there'll be such and such discount on any follow-up jobs or whatever it may be.
yeah,
But then I look at it and think sometimes I think it's a stretch to ask for 2 reviews on 2 platforms, even if I say, look, once
yeah,
you've given it the time to do me Trustpilot, would you mind cutting and pasting it onto my page? That'd be great. Imagine if I was to say, right, I've got my Trustpilot, I've got my Facebook, and I've got my Google. So I'm thinking, it's difficult to sort of say, right, you really want it across the board, but which one do you, I don't want to, I know I'll have to move it on to Google, but I don't want to neglect the others. So for instance, people on Facebook where I get 50% of inquiries from may not be interested in looking onto Trustpilot, even though in
yeah.
a lot of people's eyes, Trustpilot is the sort of top tier to look at in terms of product reviews or place reviews. Some people want I'm on speaking to you through Facebook Messenger, so I'm going to look on your Facebook page. Do you understand?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like I say, exactly what the weighting is comparatively, I'm not 100% sure on. Like I say, I know they've definitely becoming more important over the last few years, few months, I should say. The last couple of updates that have come out have started prioritizing those a little bit more. But yeah, ultimately the Google one will make a big difference as well, because obviously it's one of the first places Google will look then, is to look within its own ecosystem to see what it can glean about you. So yeah, absolutely. Really, if you can start to take those kind of reviews from people, then yeah, they'll be golden over the next kind of few weeks and months. Especially, as I say, if people are going to be super cognizant of this whole kind of COVID situation, and that's going to be an important part of the process, then again, if you've got businesses, people on Google, singing your praises and talking about how kind of well prepared you were and how safe everything was and stuff as well, that'd be really important for you over the next kind of 6-12 months or so. So yeah, definitely start trying to kind of harvest some of those if you can. Obviously, have you got your Google Map pin? Have you claimed that at the minute?
I haven't. No.
Cool.
No.
Okay. Well, you can do that through the same kind of Google My Business bit once you've got everything set up. So
Okay.
again, that'll be a really useful one, because I know.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think I'll get when I'm ready to set up the reviews. I think I'll do the mapping and get it all done so it's ready to. It seems definitely from looking at it sort of on the computer screen now, it's like I'm missing out by not having those.
Yeah.
It's another thing to add on there, and I'm like, right, well, I need to, because I'm with reviews. I'm always very that having reviews is great, but you've always also got to have constant reviews. So
Sure.
nobody, if I'm looking at a service and it's got loads of reviews, but the last one was 6 months ago, I'm thinking, well, what's happened in the last 6 months?
Yeah.
So you've always got to say, right, I've had Trustpilot reviews every 3 days, perfect, but I haven't had a Facebook one in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's level that up. So it swings and roundabouts. It's just trying to match it all up to work for you, isn't it?
It's like spinning plates, isn't it? Trying to keep everything
Yeah,
going.
yeah, definitely.
With that in mind, and this has been something that I know for some of the food and drink companies of late have been kind of really relying on stuff like this, but try and utilize and jump into as many kind of local networking opportunities as you can and try and exploit some of those. I know the NN online food market's been one over the last kind of couple of months that has taken off really well. I think they've now launched a Milton Keynes one. It's been that popular, actually. There's a North Ants Hour every Thursday night on Twitter. Do you get involved in that?
No, I've heard. I think you've been promoting that, haven't you? You've discussed that before.
Yeah, it's a really useful one, actually. I mean, it's been going for, Christ, let me think, probably 6-7 years now. It was one that was kind of starting as I left NEP, and that's coming up 5 years ago. But yeah, it's one that, especially if you're trying to meet a range of either B2B or B2C kind of customers, then yeah, it's quite a useful place to be. So yeah, I would definitely recommend kind of having a look at that if you get the chance.
Yeah, definitely. I'll put that on the to-do list now.
And again, there's so many kind of local bloggers, forums. I know that some of them might be a bit more perhaps lifestyle or travel related, so might not be as kind of relevant for you. But again, that said, there will be kind of local groups, forums, even kind of closed things within LinkedIn, stuff like that, that you can kind of jump into and be a part of, all of which are all kind of real useful potential sources of kind of new business, new connections and stuff as well. So we're telling people where they can to, get out and kind of get into as much locally sourced and locally focused stuff as you can, because ultimately for a lot of businesses right now, that is going to be even more of an important part of their kind of sales and business moving forward than perhaps it has been up to now. I mean, the Canoe 2 guys, for instance, that I work with, obviously people come from all over 6, 7, 8 different counties normally to come and do the canoeing down the Nen with them. But they might find that over the next kind of 2-3 months, actually that catchment area shrinks significantly to within the Northamptonshire area, or even the East Northamptonshire area and stuff. So with that in mind, like I say, anything you can do to kind of build your presence and awareness within those kind of local markets is going to be absolutely kind of crucial over the next kind of few months. And finally, obviously, it goes without saying, this is going to be an uncertain and changing times over the next kind of few weeks and months. I don't think any of us really know kind of what we're going to be doing and how things are going to look in July, September, Christmas at this point. I think, you'd be ballsy to make a prediction about at this point. So we're saying to people, it makes kind of fairly common sense, but keep people kind of updated. Make sure, if you've got that COVID page on your website, then make sure that as your policies change or things alter, that you do keep on top of kind of making sure that's updated, that all your latest changes have been reflected. I've put a note on here about maybe adding kind of updates and disclaimers to everything that you do, emails that are going out through your MailChimp, maybe even a line on your email signature that says, please check out all of our latest COVID guidance here. Make sure you're kind of, as we've talked about, being visible and consistent on social, and making sure that all of those kind of changes and stuff are kind of regularly communicated with people and clear and easy to understand as well. So with that in mind, then broadly, just to kind of boil all this kind of down, we're trying to, at the minute, to kind of break this down with people into something of a 3-step process to try and walk everyone through kind of what comes next. First one being obviously to evaluate, secondly to adapt, and thirdly to kind of prepare as well. So in terms of evaluating, using this time right now to sit and analyze literally everything that we're doing, whether that be kind of emails, websites, social, anything that any kind of engagement point that we've got with our audience right now, sit and really take the time to analyze it, assess it. Like I said to you, do the same thing with your competition, the kind of brands that you aspire perhaps to be your competition, and start to use that as kind of the framework for what we're doing. Obviously, it's important, adapt. We've talked about translating those findings into your short-term actions. Some of them, it might be really obvious. Shit, our store is closed. We need to open an online store right away. Some, it might be more of a gradual creep of going, well, actually our events for the next 6 months have all cancelled now. So we need to find, new ways of potential future customers on social or something like that, So it's important that we very quickly try and work out actually what those kind of findings from our evaluation mean and how we can kind of translate those into meaningful actions. Put a note on here, obviously, to be mindful of the actual repercussions of whatever changes we do make at this point, and to kind of extrapolate the 2 examples from the top out. If you're launching an online store, will people be able to manage that effectively and keep that online store kind of running when a real world location kind of opens up again? So be mindful of kind of overcommitting and bringing too many things on stream that, as things go back to some kind of normalcy, you won't be able to potentially, make the most of or continue to deliver in the same way for people. Because what you'd hate to do, obviously, is, as things, on the bell curve go back to normal, that actually that user experience kind of devalues and becomes, less important and less of a useful kind of source for you guys. So make sure that we're, like I say, just being mindful of while all of these things are great now and will be really helpful for getting us through this period, actually when we are through it, are we still going to be able to do this stuff? And at the same time, are we still going to need to do this stuff? If we're going to be spending more time on social media, over the next few months, are we going to be able to, as things get busy, as you're back out on the road more often and you're physically, lifting and shifting and getting projects rolled out, are you going to be able to commit quite as much time to social media and stuff as well? And we say that, when it comes to adapting, don't be afraid to kind of adapt on the fly and to test and refine as you go along. I mean, I think we've kind of hammered this point a number of times over the last kind of couple of months, but make sure that as you are kind of going through, you're testing and changing and tweaking as you go to make sure that everything you're doing is working as effectively as possible. So as some examples, experiment with different types of content, experiment with posting that different type of content at different times of the day, which I think was something we might have touched on last week briefly. If you've got the facility within your AdWords or email provider, then look at running things like A/B campaigns on ads and email campaigns to see which might be the most effective way of doing it. Do you know what I mean by an A/B campaign?
I think you've mentioned it before, but go on.
I mean, to give an example of maybe you're sending an email out to 1,000 people on your MailChimp database, for instance. What you can do with an A/B test is to set up 2 versions of that email, maybe with a different subject line, different image in there, different wording. And what you can then do is kind of drip both of those versions out to a small segment of your database. So it might say send email A to 50 people and email B to 50 people. Then it will come back to you and go, Seb, these are the results. Email A got an 80% open rate. Email B got a 20% open rate and 10 unsubscribes. So actually, email A looks to be working way more effectively. We're going to
brilliant. Yes,
the remaining 900 via this one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, testing the waters before you jump in, basically.
Yeah. So, like I say, if you've got the ability to kind of look at doing those kind of things, then that would be a really useful way of you, without just pushing it out and kind of hoping and going, well, we'll see if that worked later down the line. It's a great way of being able to kind of stack the deck a little bit in your favor and hopefully make that email blast way more productive and efficient for you. And at the same time, we've talked about, having kind of partner link ups and all of these kind of potential external relationships to try and funnel people through to your website. Another great way of kind of monitoring that as you go along and working out if those relationships are working is to have things like dedicated landing pages for those campaigns on the site. So, if me and you were running a co-promote, say, I might have a page on my website that was soverycreative.com/hire-and-removals, which meant that, any clicks that come through, from your website to me go through to that particular page. And I can see then running through the analytics at a glance, oh, that said page is really sticky. People are really interested in that. Do you see what I mean? So by if you just push people through to kind of soverycreative.com, it's sometimes difficult to know, with any real degree of kind of accuracy, exactly what they're there for and kind of what they were looking for, So by having those kind of landing pages in place and kind of filtering.
Be specific to the content, so clicking on it, they know immediately what they're clicking on and what they're looking at.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously from a user point of view as well, it might be that actually the reason people are coming through to that landing page from mine and your specific campaign is one very specific piece of information. So I can strip all of the rest of the site out of the way, make sure that piece of information is right at the top of that, and therefore from a user point of view, that makes that journey way more kind of satisfying and useful as well. So like I say, there's all kinds of different ways that you'll be able to kind of monitor and tweak and refine all of it in various ways as you are kind of delivering it. But like I say, if you've got the luxury and the willingness to do so, it will definitely help to make kind of what you're doing a little bit more efficient at each step. And finally, obviously, this kind of goes without saying, but things are easing now. But ultimately, as we've said, we don't know, whether that's going to stick around. I've heard about localized lockdowns potentially over the next few months. and ultimately we don't really know kind of what's going to be, you know, the shape of the next kind of 12 months even. So with that in mind, it's important to make sure that our kind of plans take kind of some awareness of that, and have kind of built that into our thinking right from the off. We're telling all of our kind of guys at the moment, you know, to make sure that we've got a toolkit prepared for future scenarios in the event that, you know, if everything gets locked down and we have to pivot back to our online only model, say, then, you know, make sure we've got all of our statements drafted, website updates ready for publishing, maybe even build those pages and have them in draft form on the website ready to click back into normal kind of at a moment's notice. You know, have your press releases and stuff ready to go, and also, you know, making sure all of your kind of staff partners, anyone that's kind of working on the project with you, have got all of the skills and information and tools and stuff they need to be able to kind of transition straight back into it as well. You know, I think there was some businesses that saw what was coming down the pipe with lockdown and stuff early and kind of got prepared and ahead of the game, and some that had to just pull the shutters down and go, oh shit, now what? So I think, yeah, the guys that are going to maybe take a little bit of time now to future-proof themselves a little bit and get some of this stuff kind of into place ready, I think we'll definitely see, hopefully, a slightly easier transition should they need to kind of pivot back to that kind of online only model again kind of later down the line as well. So like I say, between the three kind of strands of that, the evaluate what we're doing, adapting kind of how that kind of shifts our thinking methodology, and kind of preparing for the worst, and I say preparing for the worst, but preparing for a future at this point that is a little bit uncertain, and that we're kind of future-proofing ourselves against a little bit, will hopefully stand you in kind of fairly good stead over the kind of the coming weeks and months, as you hopefully begin to start to deliver this kind of marketing plan now that we've, you know, given you the skills, the tools, and the kind of the thinking behind. Hopefully now, yeah, you'll be able to start kind of putting all of those pieces together and see some kind of meaningful benefit from it as well. So with that in mind, buddy, I wonder if there was any kind of particular questions or anything you wanted to kind of ask or chat about, obviously, at that point.
Yeah, not really, if I'm honest. I mean, it was quite informative, and I mean, most of the questions which were popping up in my head, you were sort of answering as you was going, which is always a good, shows you're doing it well. Yeah, I think that basically I've come away from that to say, look, you need to be planning and make sure that you've got all areas covered, really. I mean, I'm sort of trying to be as positive as I can to think, right, we're hopefully coming to the end of it, but I'm also there to say, look, I know that I've been through it, so if it happens again, I know what I need to be doing. I know, I know what can be done. So I think the key is to just not be blasé about it and just be prepared for it sort of lockdown happening again, and trying to get business as usual to try and secure that you can carry on through it, or be prepared for this hopefully is the end of it and business is going to be back to normal. So keep grinding. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.